Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the course of Language Teaching Methodologies. The course code is ENG 483 and today I am going to give you lecture on direct method. This is the introduction of direct method and I will give you further information on the topic in the next lecture. I am your teacher Muhammad Asif Khan, lecturer, Department of English, Cohort University of Science and Technology. Dear students, agenda for today's lecture is that first of all I will give you the brief history of this method, and then I will move toward the language theory which is being used by the theorists of this method. We will also discuss the goals and objectives of this method. After that, I will define the main features of direct method, and I will discuss the principles on which this method is based on. We will also discuss the methodology being used by Berlitz in his schools and what is the similarity between this Berlitz schools method and the direct method. We will also discuss the features of the material being used in direct method, and I will also tell you in this lecture the role of teacher and the role of learner. So this is the agenda for today's class. Now let's start with the discussion on the history of direct method. Darwin is one of the first of 19th century reformers who attempted to build a methodology around the observations of child language learning. We see that there are many other reformers who turned their attention towards the naturalistic principles of language learning, and for this reason we see that sometimes the practitioners of direct method are referred to be the advocates of the natural method. So some of the critics name this method as natural method. Basically, direct method is an attempt to make the second language learning more like the native language or the first language learning. We see that this very attempt to use the natural language learning process in the teaching methodologies is not the new experiment. There were also earlier experiments there. We see in the 16th century, Montaigne describes how he had learned the second language. We see that he was entrusted to a guardian and who addressed him exclusively in Latin language because he was teaching him Latin, and he used the language, that second language, as a method of his instruction. There is another personality, Althusser, and he belongs to the 19th century. We see that his time period is from 1826 to 1907, and he also used intensive oral interactions in the target language. And the method he used in his teaching is that he employed questions. He used questions as a way of presenting, eliciting language. So basically, his method soon came to be referred as natural method because he was using the target language as a method, as a medium of instruction in his class. So believers in the natural method, they argue that foreign language could be taught without translation or the use of the learner's native language. Before that we have grammar translation method, and there was a perception that if you want to learn a language, the most important thing is to master the art of translation. And there we see that the teachers were using native language as a medium of instruction in second language learning class. So if according to the natural method, if you are learning a foreign language, you do not need translations or the use of the learner's native language, and if you are directly conveying the meanings with the help of demonstration and actions, it is very easy to learn the second language. So according to the direct method, demonstration and actions are enough to communicate or convey the meanings to the students of the second language. There is another reformer, and he belongs to Germany, and his name was F. Frank, and he basically discussed the psychological principles of direct association between the forms and meanings in the target language. Earlier we were seeing that the grammar translation practitioners, they were establishing or they were associating the words of the second language by giving the meanings into the first language or the mother tongue or the native language. But here we see that Frank has given some psychological principles of direct association between the forms and meanings, and that very thing was being done in the target language. And these very principles provided a theoretical justification for the monolingual approach to teaching language. Beforehand we have a bilingual approach to the language teaching in the grammar translation method. So basically direct method has a language theory, and according to them, the natural language learning principles provide the foundation for what come to be known as direct method. How a child learn his first language, in the same way they were propagating that you can learn the second language. So this is the history of the direct method of language teaching. Now let's move towards the goals and objectives. So the first aim of the teacher or the theorist of direct method is to establish a direct bondage between the experience of the learner and the expression of the learner. If he succeed in establishing this very connection, it becomes very easy for the learner to speak or learn the second language in a very short span of time. The second thing is that when we use direct method, learners think and communicate in the target language. The third important aim and objective of direct method is that acquisition of language is in the natural way. And here we see that like a child, the learner, he learns the grammar inductively. So basically in grammar translation method, we are not focusing on the translations or the grammar rules, but the basic focus is on the development of oral skills. So we see that learners are using target language, and they are focusing on the oral skill. And the third thing and the last thing is that they avoid the use of native language. So these are some of the objectives or some of the goals of direct method. Now let's move towards the main features of the direct method. We see that the classroom instruction in direct method is conducted exclusively in the target language, and the teacher initially he introduces everyday vocabulary and sentences, and he is just giving a general connection. He just connect or associate the learner to the everyday vocabulary of the target language. But in the intermediate phase, we see that the teacher introduces the grammatical concepts. He also make the students to read and write, and in this way we see that he moves towards the advanced level, where some of the exercises are being introduced to the students, where they learn the advanced grammar, reading and writing skills. But the main focus of direct method is to build the oral communication skill or the speaking skill of the learner. So oral communication skill is built up in this method, and we see a carefully graded progression that is being organized around the questions and answer exchanges. And this very process occurs between the teacher and the students. So this is the way initially just teacher introduces the everyday vocabulary, then he introduces the grammatical concepts, and students are then introduced to the reading and writing material, and in the end we see that there is a graded progression that is organized around the question and answer exchanges between the teacher and student. But one thing very important, that grammar is taught inductively. They are not giving the principles of grammar or the rules of the grammar to the student, but we see that the student learns these rules indirectly. And the most important concept in the direct method is that we see that new teaching points are introduced orally. All new points are being discussed with the students. These very concepts are introduced orally. So these are the basic principles. Now let's move toward the vocabulary. We see that two types of vocabulary is being taught to the students. If we introduce the students with concrete vocabulary, that very vocabulary is being taught through demonstrations, or the objects, real objects being presented to the students, or we see that sometimes the teacher show the students the pictures of these very objects, and then he gives the concept of this concrete vocabulary to the students. Another type of vocabulary being introduced to the student is abstract vocabulary, and we see that abstract vocabulary is taught by association of the ideas. It means that some of the ideas are already there in the mind of the student, so teacher associates one idea with another idea, and in this way he teaches them the abstract ideas and abstract vocabulary. So the students of the direct method are taught both the speaking and listening comprehension, and we see that here correct pronunciation and the correct grammar form is emphasized. So these are the two concepts. Initially I told you that in grammar translation method we see that instruction, medium of instruction is in the target language, and initially the teacher introduces the everyday vocabulary, then he introduces the students with the grammatical concepts, and reading, writing material is introduced to the student, and then comes the main focus of direct method, and that is the development of oral skill. When we see the vocabulary, we see that concrete vocabulary is taught to the students through demonstrations, objects and pictures, and abstract ideas are taught by association of ideas. Speech and listening comprehension is taught to the students, and we also see that the focus on the correct pronunciation and the correct use of grammar is emphasized in this very method. Now we have Berlitz method and Berlitz schools chain in America that use this direct method. So now I will give you some of the basic guidelines which were being given to the teachers for teaching oral language, and these very principles are even followed in the contemporary Berlitz schools. The first very principle or the guideline for the teacher is never translate your ideas. Instead of that, teacher has to demonstrate the concepts or the vocabulary or the material to the students. The second thing is that teacher should not explain his concepts. Instead of that, he should act in front of his students. Another suggestion for the teacher is never make a speech. Just ask questions. and if you are successfully framing such type of questions which generate the discussion, then it automatically helps the students to improve their conversational skills or their oral skills. Another guideline is never imitate mistakes. It is very necessary to correct the mistakes of the students and provide them opportunity to speak the right language. But the teacher should adopt such type of methods where he gives the chance to the student to correct their mistakes by themselves. Another guideline for the teacher is that he should not speak with single words. Instead of that, he should use sentences. The teacher should not speak too much, and it is the responsibility or the role of the teacher to make students speak for the most of the time in the class. And I will continue these principles in this way, that it is very necessary for the teacher that he should not use the book. Instead of that, he should use his lesson plan during his class. So when he will be using his lesson plan, he need not to jump around from one point to another point, because he will be following a specific plan which he has already designed for his class. So it is very important for the teacher that he should maintain his speed. He should not go too fast. Instead of that, he should know the speed of his students, and he should keep the pace of the students. So if the teacher is going very fast, or he is touching the other extreme, from that I mean that if he is moving forward very slowly, even then he will not be successful in delivering his outcome. So never speak too fast, or never speak too slowly, or never speak too quickly. And in the same way, it is being suggested to the teacher that he should not speak too loudly. So instead of that, he should keep the pace of the students. He should speak normally. He should speak naturally. And the last thing is that teacher should not get impatient. And because if he will be impatient, he will be very anxious that his students are lacking in these very things. Instead of that, he should take all these developments very easy, and he will see that gradually, slowly and gradually, the students will improve and come up to that mark which is being required by the teacher. So very necessary that teacher should avoid translations or unnecessary type of explanations. And we see that most of the time teachers are giving long speeches to the students. So instead of that, he should just ask the questions and involve the students in his discussion. In the same way, if the teacher is using sentences and he is introducing the new vocabulary within sentences, we see that the students automatically get the concept of the right use of that new vocabulary. Lesson plans are very important, and we see that if the teacher is aware of the level of the students, and he just maintain that very pace, which is the pace of the students, we see that it becomes very easy, and teacher does not get impatient. Now let's move towards the material being used in direct method. The most important thing is that the syllabus of direct method is based on the everyday situations or the topics, and it is not based on the linguistic structures. So we see that teachers are using pictures, teachers are using maps, and teachers are using books to demonstrate new ideas. So the syllabus of the direct method is based on the everyday situations and topics. Now let's move towards the role of teacher and the learner in the direct method. We see that in direct method, teacher plays an active role. He is basically the director of the class, and he is organizing all the activities that is going to be applied in the classroom. In the use of direct method, we see that the teachers have to undertake a great effort, because they are not allowed to talk in mother tongue. So they have to find a very meaningful teaching material and to study along with the text in the book, because if they are teaching something, they have to prepare that material which they will deliver along with the main concepts being presented in the different topics and situations. So the teacher tries to make the student understand the journal rules and structures, and this very thing is being done through the stretches of the target language that are being studied in the classroom. It is not like this that the teacher first of all gives the journal rule of the grammar or any other rule and then give the examples to them. Actually, students have to identify the different language rules indirectly within the material that is being provided by the teacher. Direct method has inductive spirit, and in this very method we see that we move from specific to the general. So a native teacher, or one who has proficiency like a native teacher, he can better carry out the role of teacher along with the direct method. Most of the teachers who are not native speakers or have some issues with the proficiency of the language, so they are not that much successful in this method. So teacher introduces language to the student, and all these things are being done in the target language, and we see there is no use of mother tongue. So what the teacher do, what teachers do in the class, they use pictures, they use realias and pantomimes, and they demonstrate and communicate words or ideas in their classrooms. So basically teacher emphasizes interaction with the students. Teacher asks questions and try to use grammatical structures of the everyday conversation, and we see that they use new vocabulary and they introduce new vocabulary to the students, so that they expand, they get progression in their lectures. So teacher is the one who demonstrates, or teacher is the one who is facilitator for the students, or he is the monitor, because teacher makes students speak, and he make them speak much. So basically he is a facilitator to the students to be in the activities, and we see that he or she find various techniques to get the students to self-correction. Actually he helps the students to make self-corrections. In the same way, teacher emphasizes both the speech and listening comprehension, and on the other hand, as we studied the role of the teacher, we also see that the role of learner is very well defined in direct method, and we see it is less passive and not very much passive. We see that he is like a partner of the teacher, and they are the followers of the directions that are coming from the teacher. So students are active learners. In every class they participate, and here we see that they are actively acquiring the language in the target language. So for the student it is very important that he has to make self-corrections, and it provides an opportunity for the students to learn by self-correction. Last 2 points are that student speaks a lot in this method, and they put into practice their oral communication. And the last point is that a student is basically an observer, and he is the practitioner of the target language. So these are some of the basic concepts about the direct method. I hope that now you have the basic concept of this method. In the coming classes, we will study the advantages and disadvantages. We will also discuss the common techniques being used by the teachers within the classroom for making students to learn the target language. So thank you very much. See you in the next lecture.